Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Languages Pedagogy podcast. Today we have another wonderful guest, another wonderful teacher, someone with the experience and knowledge that we all need. We need that light. Today we have uh this. I will say, I mean, it's really hard for me to put him into just a couple of words because Donna, it's your work. I've been reading your work and I've been seeing actually everything you've been doing actually for this beautiful profession, for education, for language learning, language teaching. I cannot actually put him into a couple of words. And if I have to do it, I'll have to take like around 30 minutes of the whole episode just to say it. But why don't you just help us and introduce yourself, tell us what you do and what you have been doing all this time in this field.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. One of the advantages of being an older person is that you have a lot of experience. It just comes with age. So I've been in the field for a long time, and I'm basically a teacher educator, language teacher educator, um, also an author, and also a consultant. So I've done a lot of work in the field for programs such as U.S. Department of State, where I've been an English language specialist. And that's one of the things that I've loved about my quote unquote retirement, um, is that I've been able to go to many countries and work with teachers in those countries who are English language teachers. But I thought maybe what I would do for this program is start with a little bit of history of how I became a teacher educator. So I actually started out my career as a German teacher and as a student of German language and literature. And I did that. I was a teaching assistant in an MA program, and I thought that my life was going to be that of a German language teacher. But upon receiving my master's degree in German, I learned that many language programs around the country were being canceled, um, and that there were no jobs for German language teachers at all. So my whole world kind of turned upside down. Um, but some of the other teaching assistants in my program told me, well, there's a rumor that the German government is looking for English language resource teachers. And you can write, in those days you wrote because there was no internet. You can write to the German Ministry of Culture and apply for one of these jobs. So I did that. And I got back a letter that said, congratulations, you've been accepted, and please appear at this particular place at this particular time, and we'll introduce you to your new teaching environment.
Wow.
So I did that. I took a charter flight to Germany and a train from Frankfurt up to North Germany, where I was being placed, and met with the ministry official and got introduced to the principal. And I spent my year, 1 year, working in a wonderful environment. But I realized quite quickly that teaching in the schools was not my forte. I wasn't really cut out for working with teens and even younger children. So at the end of that year, I thought I'll return to California, which is my home state. And then I met a gentleman, excuse me, who said, "Oh, we don't want a wonderful person like you to return to California. We want to keep you in Germany. So um, I know
Oh,
of a job at a business college, and I'll take you there. I'll pick you up and take you there, and you can interview." So I did, and I got that job, and I stayed for another 4 years teaching
wow.
what I now know is English for specific purposes. But in those days, because I didn't have any background in really formal background in teaching English. Um, I just thought, well, I'm teaching English to these business students.
Yeah.
And I did some specialized courses like English for management and English for data management, other things like that. It was quite an interesting job with a group of adults, and I realized that adults was really something that was much better for me than teaching younger learners. Um, at and then one day I arrived at that college, and the college was boarded shut, and the students were all standing in the parking lot saying, "The owners have absconded with the money and the school is closed." So I went to the German unemployment office and they said, well, you've got full unemployment for 6 months. So I had a very nice time traveling all around Europe. And at the end of
Definitely.
that time, I went back to California and I decided I really, if I'm going to be an English teacher, I probably need some more formal background in that. So I entered the program at UCLA, which was a wonderful program in those days. And I actually never left there because after I finished my degree, there was a job opening in a small media center that was operated by the department, and they needed somebody to be in charge of the media center. So I did that for that half time and half time as a lecturer in their program. And that was a wonderful balance between the two. And one of the courses that I taught as a lecturer was a graduate level course in materials development, especially
Mm.
media materials development. So that got me into the whole teacher education field. That was my segue into becoming a teacher educator. And after that, once they saw that I was able to handle graduate students. That opened up the field to other courses. So I taught for many years the teaching practicum and the methodology course. And that teaching of the methodology course sort of opened up some other options like writing about methodology. And I got involved with this project with my mentor, Professor Mary Ann Salsmercia, to work on a book that's known as fondly as the Apple book. It's Teaching English as a Second or Foreign Language. In its third edition, I helped her with the third edition. And then when the fourth edition came out, she asked me if I would be a co-editor. And I said, if I can add a third co-editor, Anne Snow, who was one of my colleagues that I'd been working with. So the three of us worked on the fourth edition, and we've just now published the fifth edition of that book. So I'm very proud of that. Um,
Of course.
yeah,
That's a very
and
good reason to be proud of.
yeah, it is. It is. It was about this latest edition was about 3 years of my life. So a lot of work, 47 authors. So it's an
Um,
edited volume. And it's when you have 47 authors, it's kind of like herding cats.
Exactly.
So yeah, wonderful authors. But of course, there's a lot of stuff that goes on,
Of
that
course.
you need to be in charge of.
Well, it sounds
And
beautiful career.
yeah, it's been a beautiful career. And then, as I
Yeah.
mentioned, the work with U.S. State Department as an English language specialist, I was able to visit 40 different countries
Well,
and work with teachers from those countries, sometimes multiple times. I've been to some countries as many as, say, 13 times.
oh,
So that's been a wonderful, wonderful.
oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that I like about what you're telling us about your story is that your story is the reflection of what actually happens in our life, is what it's happening right now to new teachers, the newcomers. Sometimes they don't even know what they want to do. Why teaching? Teaching is not my career or something like it. But
Yeah,
we all
absolutely.
start like that, like maybe we just started like, okay, maybe I'm gonna do this for once and that's it. But no, in little by little, it's becoming your career. I think it's really inspirational.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think I ever thought I was going to be a teacher. I just fell into things. And for
Yeah.
the most part, I never even had to interview for jobs. Jobs just kind of appeared and happened. So,
So
and
it
writing
was your career.
projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as I probably didn't mention the writing as much, but I've done a number of different volumes, and they all sort of happened because somebody said, "Hey, let's try to write a book about topic X or topic Y," and and I've been very fortunate that publishers have accepted these books and published them, and so I'm very proud of my career as an author as well.
Of course. Yeah, I was
But what
actually
I've
reading. I was trying to read your CV, and well, it's impressive. And yep, I pretty much look up to you and try to get a little bit of that. At least half, I would be happy.
well, I think, like I said, a lot of it has to do with how long you've been in the profession. And I
Yeah,
entered the profession a long, long time ago. And I think that that's partially why I have such a long CV, is because I've been working for so many years.
yeah. But that's I mean that's how it is, right? We worked,
Hmm.
we built everything with time and experience and all that. But
Yeah,
I there's one question that actually comes to my mind now that I just heard you, if you allow me. If you
sure.
had to describe your journey in one sentence, not your CV, but your evolution, what would it be?
That's a really tough question, Mike. I think what I would say is that I've become less prescriptive
Mm,
about things. Um, I should mention that when I entered the field,
mhm.
the methodology was when I first started taking language classes. So this is before I was a teacher. My
Yeah.
first class was grammar translation,
Ooh,
French. I had a French teacher, Mr. Brandeis, who taught us French via grammar translation, very, very prescriptive method. And then following year, he somehow disappeared, and we had another teacher and a language lab. This was the early language labs, and this was audiolingual methodology, and again,
mm,
a very prescriptive methodology.
yes.
I think I've become more eclectic, less prescriptive,
Mm,
more eclectic, and more accepting of the fact that um, circumstances dictate a lot. So the settings in which we teach, the students that we have in our class dictate what is most important for them and what we can be doing with them and how we can most effectively teach them. I don't know if
definitely.
that answers your question or not,
No,
but
actually it is. It is. Actually, it's answering there. And oh, you're
Capture life's precious moments in stunning details with our professional cameras. Unleash your creativity and preserve memories like never before. Visit us now at frameflowcn.com.
you're actually bringing also a little bit of what it was in back then, right? There was some sort
oh
of
yeah.
methodology, and right now we got so many new trends and so many new discoveries. Then we have neuroscience, neurolinguistic, neurolanguage, and so many new terms. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's really important actually to know this. So, what is the real responsibility of a TESOL teacher educator today? How do you see it?
Okay, so I have a long list of things. We can kind of go one by one, not in any order of importance necessarily, just sort of things that I think if we are teacher educators and we're working with novice teachers, particularly novice teachers,
Yes,
um, what can we do? And I mean, the list could go on and on. So I'm going to condense it to a list of maybe 12 things that I think we can do realistically
of
in a
course.
methods course that we're teaching. And this is coming largely from my experience at UCLA. where I did teach the methods course for many, many years, but also from the volume that we just published, which is a text that's intended for introductory methodology courses. And some new ideas may be there that we put into the volume, both because we thought they were important and in some cases because the publisher thought it would be an important topic as well. So let me start with the first thing that I think is really important, and that is imbuing in novice teachers a little bit of a sense of history. They need to know
Yes.
a little bit about all of these methods, all of these approaches, um, and what are the current trends at play. But I like for novice teachers to know that just because a method is older, even something like audiolingualism, that there are pieces, bits and pieces of audiolingualism, for example, that I think are still very important in certain types of classes, certain settings. I'm a pronunciation specialist. That's one of the things that I've also published about. And when we talk about pronunciation, we talk a lot about drilling. And many
Yeah.
teachers would just, go, oh my God, drilling, that's such an old and antiquated technique. But in terms of working with pronunciation, I think drilling can be very important. So as a trained audiolingual teacher, because my my work in the German classroom, I was trained as a German audiolingual teacher. Um, I learned a lot about the importance of drilling and how to do that effectively. And one of the projects that I often had in my methods classes was a group project where the students in the class would select a method that they wanted to demonstrate and do a mini demo about particular method so that they could have a sense of history about the teaching of, you know, using TPR, total physical response, or doing
Exactly.
natural approach, or doing task-based language teaching. So, or content-based teaching, for example, which is another one of my areas of expertise and specialty. So that's sort of the first thing that I think I would want in a methods course or in a teacher education
Well,
course.
it is really important actually for everyone, for all the new teachers. But I would say everyone, not only new ones, but sometimes we have these type of teachers that are very like square and they don't want to
Mhm.
actually accept this type of methodology, or they're pretty stick to one single methodology or something like
Right,
it.
right.
So it's actually
I'm
for
not
everyone, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not a prescriptivist, as I said. I like to think that we can be more eclectic and that teachers need to know about these methods in order to use bits and pieces that are effective um,
Exactly.
in their teaching. And we never know what types of environments we're going to be teaching in. I never thought that I would be teaching in Uzbekistan, but that's the country that I've visited the most in my
Wow.
State Department travels. Um, and I think the second country that I've visited the most is Japan. Um, so I never thought that I would be teaching in environments like that, but I just finished a distance course in Japan with experienced language teachers who are going back to get a master's degree. And it's
Mhm.
wonderful to be able to work with teachers like that. So that's my first thing. If I can move on to the next one, I think
Of course.
the next one would be lesson planning. Lesson planning
Ah,
is so essential, and it's easy to criticize things like the PPP lesson plan. But I think that when we are working with novice teachers, giving them a sort of more prescriptive way of doing the lesson can be very helpful because they're literally not aware of how to plan a lesson at all. And I think that is something that giving them options, letting them know what are different types of lesson plans, what are different um, theories of what is an effective lesson. Those are really important things for them, and getting them to produce lesson plans that you can look at as a teacher. All my years of doing the practicum at UCLA, where I went into the community and saw my novice teachers actually teaching lessons under the supervision of a mentor teacher. I think mentoring teachers in that process is very important too. So I think that's sort of the next
The
thing. And
the
there's
lesson
quite a bit of.
planning is
Go
is
ahead, Mike.
the lesson planning is, does it have to be rigid and everybody needs to follow it? Like it is something like that, so structured that you cannot actually come out from the lesson?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, you don't want it to be rigid like that. You want to be able to, you know, to make adjustments on the spot. But that's very hard for novice teachers to do. I think for experienced teachers, you see, oh, this isn't going very well. Let me try something else. But
Exactly.
with the novice teacher, they're standing there with their lesson plan, and that's it. And that's all they know how to do. And
Exactly.
you know, my heart goes out to those teachers because they're struggling. But I totally agree that the lesson plan should not be something that's rigid. And the more we can be flexible and the more we can say, whoa, that isn't working at all. Let me rethink how I'm going to do this and let's try again. That's something that is very effective.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. If I'm going to move on,
Yes.
so here's a really difficult thing for not just novice teachers, but basically all teachers. You have a required textbook that you're supposed to be teaching from, and that required textbook is something that's not what you would have written yourself, and it's maybe not even really the most effective set of teaching materials for the teacher, for
Hmm.
the students that you're working with. So how can you work with this textbook and make it more effective for your students? How can you bring in, and sometimes time is very, very limited. So you have to
Exactly.
cover chapter one or you have to cover chapters 1 through 20 in a given time period. And that doesn't give you a lot of time to bring in additional, more motivational materials. But I think figuring out how to do that, how you can bring in a three-minute video clip just to motivate your students or do some kind of intro activity that isn't there in the textbook that will help the learners to be more motivated to do the reading passage that they're supposed to be doing or do the listening passage that they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's not an easy thing to address in a methods class.
Definitely.
I think um, probably more appropriate maybe in the practicum where they're working with a required textbook and they may be experiencing some difficulties getting this learners to be motivated. Um, I know from all of the international work that I've done that many of the textbooks that they're using in international settings are are intended for the broadest possible audience. And that means that the topics necessarily are not necessarily motivational for those students. And I was doing some work in Kurdistan, and I asked the teachers, so what do you think about the topics in your textbook? And they said, well, some of them are good and some of them are really not appropriate for our students. And I said, well, which topic is the one that you think is the least appropriate? And they said, oh, the one about trains. And I said, why? Well, we don't have any trains in our country. No, you know, there are no trains at all in Kurdistan. So, our learners are not at all, and do you have the ability to just skip that chapter? Maybe not. Maybe the requirements are that you have to teach every single chapter. And then how do you make them how do you make your students motivated? So that's another thing I think that's really kind of
That's
important
rigidity.
is,
Yeah,
yeah,
rigidity.
but yeah,
We are actually just enclosed into what a book is. And here's
yeah,
something that actually one of my colleagues says one time. Some schools believe that the book is God.
mhm,
Follow
yeah,
exactly what the book is, and that's it. You cannot come out of it.
mhm,
And that's all, again, is rigidity.
yeah,
When everything's too rigid, just like going this, cannot do it differently. No, then it becomes kind of a hard for the teacher.
yeah. It does indeed. It's not it's not something that's helpful. It's actually a hindrance in that case, and that's
Yeah,
not what we want. Especially if we're textbook authors, we want our texts to be motivational for students. But you know, when you think about the topics that are popular topics in textbooks, the learners are like, oh no, please no more global warming. We've had so many chapters about global
yes,
warming, or please no more women in the workplace. And so textbook authors, I think, are always stretching to find new topics that can be motivational. But it's hard for them because they're trying to write a book that's going to be popular in 25 or 30 different countries. And that's probably pretty much of an impossible task.
exactly.
Yeah. So that's the next thing, working with required textbooks and personalizing or supplementing them. Um, Maybe the next one would be learning to provide effective
Feedback.
learner feedback, and assessing learner progress. And
Yes,
I think
challenging.
challenging. Very often, assessment is is sort of something that comes at the very end, and that's
Hmm.
not really the fact. I mean, assessment is something that we're doing. Feedback is a form of assessment, and it's probably
True.
the most effective form of classroom assessment is giving feedback to learners and doing it judiciously and doing it in such a way that the learners are not, intimidated or embarrassed or anything like that. And again, there, you need to know your learners because some learners are much more easily intimidated or
Yes.
really worried about making mistakes where others aren't. And so you have to
Hmm.
sort of know your students and know how you can provide feedback and know which forms of feedback are the most effective. So that's something that I think needs to be taught and needs to be a part of a, a methods course.
Definitely. Feedback, how to address it, how to give the feedback, because that's another one. It's not only what you say, but it's also how you say it.
How you say it. Yes,
Ah,
exactly, Mike.
that's another one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree
yeah,
with what you say, because it's really
yeah.
important actually to do it. How to motivate the students. We don't motivate the students just by giving them a really good or a proper textbook, but also the words that comes out of our mouth are powerful. So they're also part of it. So the feedback, I think it's also really important.